What is the most fucked up thing you've seen your parents do? When I was maybe 13, my cousin had a baby and my mom went over to my nana's house to wait for the baby with a butcher knife. She was going to stab my cousin's newborn because she thought it was the Antichrist. Stepmom purposely falsely accused me twice of stealing from her. First time she told me she was going to do it to get my dad to cut off paying for my college and kick me out. It worked. Second time she accused me of what would have been a felony amount to try to get me thrown in jail. Luckily it didn't work out for her that time. I was about 9. There was a performance at the school. I was in the choir. My dad dropped me off and picked me up afterwards. When I was picked up, I found out I was in huge trouble. He absolutely unleashed on me, closed fist, kicked me, threw me against the wall, broke furniture. Grown man strength versus a 9-year-old, jeez. To this day I remember just curling up in a ball and him wailing on me. For weeks I had no idea what I had done. My offense, my shirt was untucked when he picked me up. To him it meant I was running around raising hell while unsupervised. Actually, it was the choir's costume. We were farm people singing tunes from Oklahoma. Once while my sister and I were upstairs, my parents were fighting really loud downstairs. Suddenly, we hear complete silence. My sis and I came out of our rooms at exactly the same time to go see what was going on. We rushed down the stairs and saw my father choking my mother. She stayed with him for approx 10 years after that. Oh, and the day after that happened, we all went on a happy vacation, with my mother pretending nothing had happened and instructing us to do the same. Edit. Thanks all for the replies with well wishes, shared stories and words of encouragement. It's been overwhelming. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your comment. At a certain point, I had to step away from it. I hope you will understand. I caught a lake turtle on my fishing line as a kid. We tried to get the hook out but the unfortunate thing had swallowed it whole. My poor dad couldn't figure out what to do. We tried to kill it with a pellet gun, but it was underpowered and didn't even break the skin. Eventually he sent me inside the house and said he's take care of it. I was bawling and couldn't pull myself away. Saw him pick up a cinder block and smash it to death with 3-4 blows before kicking the remains into the lake. Horrible. I hated him for it at the time. But looking back on it now, as I'm now close to the age he was at the time, I really feel bad for him. I don't know that he had much else of a choice and I'm sure it rattled him just as much as it did me. My dad intentionally set his hand on fire to demonstrate that whatever fluid he was using burns with a cold flame. He was normally a very smart, level-headed person, I swear. Parent threatened OD if we didn't go to bed. Edit. Thank you for the reward. We are all in a much better place now. When I was a little kid, probably around 10, my mom told me to send her checkbooks in the mail that belonged to my grandmother. My mom didn't live with us and she told me that my grandmother had asked me to send them since she was out of town. So I did. I later got sat down by my grandmother and she was furious with me for sending the books. My mother had apparently done this in order to commit fraud and had drained my grandmother's life savings from close to $1 million down to nothing. I got blamed for it until my grandmother passed away. One of her last conversations with me at age 24 was her still expressing her disappointment in me for sending the books. My mother denies the whole thing to this day. Why did your grandmother believe a 10-year-old would commit fraud? I think my grandmother was deflecting the blame because she didn't want to face the reality that her only child continuously tried to steal her money. I don't think she really blamed me. I was the catalyst. When I was like 11 I saw them doing drugs in their bedroom. Middle of the day, no consideration for me at all. It scared me half to death because they both got zombie-like on whatever it was. Mom threw a butcher knife at my stepdad and it stuck in the wall next to his head. My mom aggressively forced a bear hugger, a foster kid who'd been repeatedly raped by her father while her mom held her down. So, My mom is a boundary stomper extraordinaire and abused me all throughout my childhood. I eventually wound up in foster care myself and haven't spoken to her in years. But remembering this, it was the most cruel thing I ever saw her do to anyone who wasn't me. My relatives had a foster daughter who, as I said above, had been raped by her dad while her mom held her down. My mother knew this. My relatives made the mistake of inviting my mother over, and my mom said, "Welcome to the family. Give a hug," to the girl. Who said no? My relatives said no. My mother kept saying, "But why? Why not? Come on." Because she's traumatized by hugs and touches after being raped so much. Why this was a bad idea, even though it should have been obvious. Because neither I nor my relatives wanted to just grab her in a big bear hug and wouldn't let go while the girl tried to push her off plus hyperventilated. To my shame, and the shame of my relatives, we all just stood there for a moment in stunned silence before running over and removing my mother from the girl, who was now crying. The girl ran off to her bedroom. My relatives, the foster parents, told my mom to get out. Then my mom dragged me off to the car and yelled at me for a while. Finally, when I could get a word in, I explained to my mother why the hug was so wrong and hurtful. I explained that my mom should have taken context into account. My mom, the girl is ducked up in the head if she can't even take a hug from somebody nice, and she's probably lying about her parents anyway. God. I'm still mad remembering it. Go to court to defend my brother and discredit me in a sexual abuse case. Excuse me. I was their child, too. I remember them having sex on the kitchen counter behind us while we were having breakfast before school. One year they got a massive tub of chocolate as they were into eating foods off each other, but they hated it. So us kids had chocolate body spread sandwiches for nearly a year. It was a huge tub. When they got into fights it would turn into a throwing match. My mum dented the double glazed window with a frying pan. It is possible, and to this day, at least 15 years later, she still has the pan in question. Redecorated the lounge. And about a week later were so drunk they got into an argument which resulted in my mum throwing her plate of salad at my stepdad, getting mayo and lettuce leaves on the wall. And I vaguely remember it still being stuck to the wall 6 months later, when my stepdad fell asleep on the sofa downstairs. She'd turn the Bible channel on, or any other religious channel, put the TV on full blast and take the remote to bed with her so he couldn't change it. My parents gave my older sister up to child services because they didn't want to take care of her anymore. Mom threatened to shoot herself over the new dog crapping on the carpet. She's a very all or nothing woman. Her sound for "I am struggling with the peanut butter jar" is the same as her sound for "someone is currently being murdered." Might have to do with the depression and anxiety that she passed on to me. Get lifted up 3 feet off the ground by my neck when I was 9 because I tried to defend my mom from drunk dad beating her.